Hello and welcome to the talk Investigating Spontaneous Motor Tempo Online with a Large International Sample. My name is David Hammerschmidt and I'm a PhD candidate at the Institute for Systematic Musicology at the University of Hamburg in Germany. So, what is the spontaneous motor tempo? The SMT describes the tempo of self-paced, regular and repeated movements and can be observed in many daily activities such as walking, hand clapping or cycling. It corresponds to the preferred and natural pace of isochronous motor actions and is therefore also called internal or preferred tempo. In scientific context, it is usually assessed with the finger tapping paradigm, whereby the inter-tap intervals are measured. But what does it tell us, and why is it worth investigating the SMT? It has been suggested that the pace of the SMT reflects the pulse rate or period of the intrinsic timekeeper. It is closely related to the preferred perceptual tempo in music and language, suggesting that the perceptual and rhythmic motor behaviors share the same underlying mechanism. Furthermore, it is the optimal tempo for predictive and emergent movements. So the SMT may offer a lot of information for the time and timing mechanisms and can be seen as a window into the inner sense of time. The SMT typically clusters around 500 to 600 milliseconds, which is the case in finger tapping, toe tapping, stepping on the spot, cycling, as well as in the preferred perceptual tempo in music and language, suggesting a resonance frequency at around 2 Hz. One explanation for this might be anatomical and biomechanical properties of the body. Yet, the SMT has also been found to have a large range from 150 to over 1000 milliseconds. So it seems that the SMT is subject to change, and one of the main research interests regarding the SMT is factors influencing its pace. These factors have been shown to be age, as children have a faster SMT than adults, and young adults have a faster one than old adults. This shows that the pace slows down with age, which might reflect the decline in behavioral speed. The circadian rhythm, meaning the 24-hour cycle of the biological clock, might also influence the pace, as a study has shown that the SMT speeds up in the morning and slows down in the evening. Arousal has also been shown to influence the SMT, as a higher arousal state causes the SMT to speed up. It is not known if this is a short-term effect or if a generally increased arousal level caused, for example, by long-term or chronic stress, also has an effect. Furthermore, a study by Drake and colleagues found that children with musical training had a slower SMT than children without such training. The aim of this study was to further investigate these effects by implementing the finger tapping paradigm in a web application, which allowed us to assess the SMT in people's everyday life. We hypothesized that the older the participants, the slower is their SMT, that it is influenced by the time of the day, and that participants with a higher arousal state and more long-term stress have a faster SMT. So what did we do with this study? This study had a between-subject design, and the SMT was assessed by a finger tapping paradigm. Participants were either able to tap on the touchscreen of their smartphone or tablet, their computer keyboard, or on the mouse button. The study was divided in 3 parts, and in the first part they answered questions about the age, gender, country of residence, and if they had participated in the study before. In the second part they performed the tapping task and got feedback on their tapping performance. What I mean by that I will show in a second. In the third part they rated their musical experience, asking if they made music, their current arousal level on a 5-point scale ranging from calm to excited, and long-term stress, which was assessed with a 4-item perceived stress scale. Time of the day was recorded automatically by tracking the local time of the respective device used by each participant. These relatively simple measures were chosen to make it easy to understand for people not typically participating in scientific studies. Here you can see the application with the instructions. The cover story was that participants could test how even they can tap without external cues and how they perform compared to others. We did not tell them that the tempo they chose was the main aspect for us. We asked them to keep the time between each tap as even as possible and to choose a pace that feels most natural and comfortable to them right now. After the tapping, they receive feedback on how even their taps were compared to the other participants. If tapping was too irregular or not enough taps were recorded, which was the case here, they were asked to repeat the task. If tapping was successful, they could proceed to the third part, which included the questionnaires on arousal, musical experience, and long-term stress. A total of 5,966 participants took part in the study. We cleaned the data by considering only participants who provided all responses. We only used the first test participation, and we performed an outlier detection on age. As some participants provided false information, for example, some stated being 1 year old, this offered a statistical approach on getting rid of false cases. In the end, analysis was based on 3,576 participants with a mean age of 27 years. 64% of them were male, and they came from 74 different countries, with a majority coming from China. 62% of them worked for 40 hours or more in a typical week. Let's have a look at the results. Here's the distribution of the SMT, and as you can see, it is multimodal as multiple peaks are present. For example, one is around 250 milliseconds, one around 500 and 1000 milliseconds. The solid line represents the median and the dashed line the overall mean, which was around 780 milliseconds. In order to account for the multimodality, we applied a Gaussian mixture model, which grouped the participants into 6 different clusters. These clusters differed in terms of the mean inter-tap intervals, and the clusters looked like this. In numbers, these clusters ranged from a very fast cluster with a mean of 265 milliseconds, a fast cluster around 525 milliseconds, and so on down to a very slow cluster around 1.75 seconds. In order to check if these clusters differed according to our hypotheses, we applied a series of ANOVAs and a regression model. Here you see the age distribution according to the SMT clusters. The black dots represent the mean and error bars represent the standard deviation. The ANOVA was significant, showing that participants in the fast cluster were younger compared to the moderately fast, moderately slow, and slow SMT clusters. This shows that the faster the cluster, the younger were participants. Time of the day was assessed by converting the time of test participation to circular vectors and then applying a circular ANOVA. As you can see, this ANOVA was also significant, suggesting that the clusters differed in terms of the mean hour of test participation. The bars show the time distribution per cluster and the black lines represent the mean hour. As you see, the slower the cluster, the earlier is the mean hour of test participation, suggesting that the earlier it was during the day, the slower was the SMT. Arousal was not significant and therefore did not differ between the SMT clusters. And the same was the case for long-term stress. Musical experience differed between clusters, showing that participants in the slow cluster had the least musical experience. In order to assess general differences in the SMT and to account for the different modes, we cluster-wise Z-transformed the inter-tap intervals and ran a regression model with the predictors age, arousal, long-term stress, and musical experience. The model resulted in significant effects for arousal, suggesting that the more aroused participants were, the faster were their SMT, and musical experience, suggesting that more experienced participants preferred a slower SMT. To sum up, the SMT slowed down with higher age. The earlier it was during the day, the slower was the SMT. Higher arousal led to a faster SMT within each cluster, yet it did not differ between the clusters. Long-term stress showed no effect on the SMT. And musical experience showed contrasting results, as more experienced participants generally preferred a slow SMT, yet the slow SMT cluster showed the least musical experience. To conclude, the SMT is multimodal, with modes around 250 milliseconds, which is indicative of an internal timekeeper with a base frequency of around 4 Hz. Our first hypothesis, stating that the SMT slows down with age, was confirmed, as was our second hypothesis, which stated that the time of the day influences the SMT. Our third hypothesis was partly confirmed as arousal showed only a small effect in the regression model, suggesting a short-term and no long-term effect. Thanks a lot for listening, and I'm looking forward to your questions. I would like to thank the people involved in this study, which you can see here. If you're interested in this study, it will be published in Frontiers in Psychology. Feel free to scan this code, which brings you directly to the article. Thank you very much.